what I was being conditioned to believe that I had to live in certain lanes versus what history and the promise of America kept telling me allowed me to break the rules.
I think this may be a fake rule in philanthropy, that taking risk is irresponsible. And to my mind, risk is simply good stewardship.
So I'm just trying to encourage, cajole, provoke, kick in the ass our sector to do its job, which is move money.
Hey there, welcome to Break Fake Rules, a podcast that brings today's news and big philanthropic issues into focus to change big giving for good. I'm Communications Claire from the Stupsky Foundation. Today, we're excited to bring you a conversation with our CEO, Glen, and today's co-host, the very thoughtful Ralph Lewin, Executive Director of the Peter E. Haas Jr. Family Fund. They both give us some fake rules right off the bat that they'd like to see the world of philanthropy break, followed by an amazing and insightful conversation with María Teresa Kumar, President and CEO of Voto Latino. Rule breakers, we're glad you're here.
Welcome to another exciting of Break Fake Rules. Here we are. And who is this sitting next to me? Well, virtually sitting next to me, the man, the myth, Mr. Ralph Lewin. Welcome to co-hosting on Break Fake Rules, Ralph.
I'm thrilled to be here, Glenn. It's been wonderful having our weekly walks in the hills of Marin County. And, some of those conversations I think will fit nicely into the podcast. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, so I think it's important to explain what you just said. Ralph is someone who I think very, very highly of, an incredible friend, and more than just a person who walks through the hills of our neighborhood with. Ralph also is the executive director of the Peter Haas Jr. Foundation. So you know a few things about philanthropy from what I understand.
Yeah, Glenn, I feel like I'm always learning.
Yeah.
Learning from you and all our friends in philanthropy. I've been at this for 7 years now. I was the first full-time employee at the Peter Haas Fund, and it's been a real ride getting to understand philanthropy. I remember going to one of my first gatherings in Chicago and feeling like, maybe I made the wrong choice.
But
why
was that? Why was that?
Well, I just felt like it was a very stiff and uptight atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And I came from a world of cultural work, literature, libraries, historians, philosophers, and things were a little looser. So I wondered, it felt like a very rule-bound culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt a little uncomfortable. And it took me, to be honest, a few years until I met people like you and Carmen Rojas and Jamie Allison and a lot of other people that just helped me understand what philanthropy could be.
Yeah. And also, coincidentally, other co-hosts of Break Fake Rules. It's funny how that worked out, isn't it?
It is. Well, you attract good people.
Oh, is that what it is? Yeah.
I think it is.
So why don't we kind of get into it a little bit here? We are just starting out in 2026. And, what are your hopes, Ralph, for the year ahead?
I think, 2025 was a hard year for so many people. I think a year characterized by both fear and courage. At the Haas Fund, we work in a particular geography, Sonoma County, but then we also do national work, trying to strengthen our democracy. And it's been most striking at the local level, how 25 shaped people. I saw families, organizations, communities really hit by fear. On one hand, fear of coming home from work and someone in your family being disappeared. But at the same time, and this is a sentiment that I hope we carry into 26, there's a real sense of courage. There's a sense that, despite everything, people are going to stand up. I mean, it was amazing to me to see the No Kings March and to see that this expression of public sentiment, this protest, was among the largest in U.S. history. And to see how that has inspired people to step up and stand with courage is really something I'm hoping for 26, because it's going to be a tough year.
I feel the same way. I'm looking for courage too. I'm looking for it in two ways. The first way is, as I think we've made pretty clear on this show and in other Stupsky Foundation related communications to the world, that we want to see, we're really hoping to see more foundations shed the priority of their institutional longevity and put more money out there, because that is our job. It's just funny how the brand and the building and the title becomes so important that people really want to put that over the fact they can move money in ways that would potentially put that in jeopardy. And I don't mean just spending down, because I'm very in favor of a spending down foundation, because I honestly don't understand. I've gotten to a point now where I'm just completely confused as to why we had to build these institutions around checking accounts. You know, like these tax shelters are created for the benefit of a wealthy person to keep more of their assets from the government. And then you get to be a quasi-government by spending it for the purposes of social benefit. And then you create all these barriers to moving the money, like staff and rules and regulations and offices and 360 reviews, like all these things that just get in the way of moving money. I find that interesting. I think the way philanthropy has been most energized, most activated, is with statements. Like we make statements. I just made a statement. I think I just made a statement. But there's nothing that came with that statement financially. And that's my only job, really, as a CEO of a foundation. I like coming onto this podcast, but I can tell you right now, if the Stupsky Foundation stopped moving money at the speed that we wanted to move, I would stop the podcast. But foundations, for some reason, I've noticed this in the last couple of years, it's almost like there's a need to put statements out more than money, which is what I'm hoping in the world of courage, we can find a way to break that ever-increasing fake rule that seems to be so common in our sectors.
Well, you know, Glenn, before working in philanthropy, I was a director of a nonprofit organization. And, you know, coming to this side, I have this tremendous joy in moving money. I mean, I don't understand why people would be reluctant to move money. I mean, you're helping people, and why would you put up barriers? But you know, what you just said reminded me, Glenn, of something I think we should celebrate inside philanthropy, naming you Critic of the Year. What's that mean to you, Glenn?
I don't know what it means. Well,
come on, let's explore
thank
that.
You for bringing that up. It really is. I will say this. People often talk about awards that people receive and how they cast the award aside. Like they get the Academy Award. Does it mean anything to you? No. Well, of course it does. Of course it does. It means a lot to be recognized. I've seen over the last 5 years, there's all kinds of awards that get announced throughout the years in philanthropy. They all have to do with influence. Much of the time, I agree, those people are influential. But for what? What are they influential for? What are they doing with their influence? And of course, Stupsky, we're just very rarely ever noted, you know. So this felt great. Inside philanthropy, we very much respect and adore Inside Philanthropy and David Callahan, who runs it. Very courageous in the things they say and do.
Agreed.
So to be honored by them is terrific. Now, that said, I have been giving a lot of thought to this. There were some other people that were named Foundation Leaders of the Year. So, you know, you and I have already talked about this, and I've had this like knot in my stomach about being called a critic, because I don't really think about this as critique. You know, and I mean we, there's a whole bunch of us out there who have published books and who have, you know, endlessly spoken on panels about the need for philanthropy to do its job, which is move money. That's all we're supposed to do. And so I don't see myself as a critic in that sense. I'm just trying to encourage, cajole, provoke, kick in the ass our sector to do its job. And that to me is not a critique. You know, for lack of a better term, it's a coach, maybe. Or I look at the people that I really respect who are pushing this message, and I think they are leaders with vision, which I would think would be an important quality for anyone named Foundation Leader of the Year. So I am a fan of a lot of foundation leaders in the United States. I'm a fan of those foundation leaders who I don't even agree with because I know it's a tough job. But I would not have picked the ones that were nominated in this particular list because I feel like so many foundation leaders today, unlike yourself, Ralph, and the people you've already named today, are continuing to reinforce a form of philanthropy that is about protecting our assets, responding at the minimal level to crisis. And I think the foundation leaders of 2025, and there are many of them who we've spoken to, and you know, who really went above and beyond what is ever thought possible or required, are the true foundation leaders of 2025. The one that looked at a crisis and said, we're responding with everything, not just 1% more. We're responding with everything we can because it's not about us. We're going to respond in the midst of a Medicaid retraction and the cut down of SNAP benefits by fighting and getting more money out of our foundations and spending our time making a video saying how important it is for wealthy people to get a tax break to give away money. So I would love to see more of that kind of leadership in philanthropy. Those are my thoughts. It's really wonderful to be acknowledged. And to everyone who, there's so many emails and direct messages and otherwise of people saying so many wonderful things about the team at Stupski for this. So I have to really thank all of you and David Callahan for taking the time to even put us in there. Thanks, Ralph.
No, kudos to you and your team, of course, at Stupski. And, it represents an acknowledgement of not only the hard work, but the thoughtfulness with which you're thinking about the sector. I think on our walk, one of the words that popped up was the idea of reformer. This is a moment, and we're going to give, I forget the exact percentage, but an amazing amount more than they've ever given before. And, I think that kind of action backed by kind of the thinking, I think partly inspired by you, Glenn, is transformative and really pushes the sector to reform. And we need more of that, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. The question, I think, is, are we stewarding at all times with the public in mind? And I think that to me is like the guiding light on what reform could mean, because so much of what we do in the sector is really, we think a lot about what we think is right, but we think about what's right for us more than we think about what's right for the community. So that's what I think of when I think of reform in this sector, because it has seemingly been very, over the years, and lesser so today than I think even 10 years ago, very much about what's important to the donor, what's right for the donor, what's right for the trustee, and so on. And so it trickles down into the rest of the team.
This idea of stewardship's really important to me. And, some people think about being the steward of risk, and that risk is irresponsible. I think this may be a fake rule in philanthropy, that taking risk is irresponsible. And to my mind, risk is simply good stewardship. That is, you have to be able to listen to the community and imagine with them where you can take a risk to make these kinds of reforms that are necessary, that will encourage the well-being of families and individuals in our society. And I feel like often in philanthropy, there is this fake rule that risk is irresponsible. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I find that really interesting. I don't know if anyone saw this or not, but I have a book coming out later this year, and I talk about risk. And it's ironic. When it comes to the investment side of a foundation, risk is seen as a very positive thing. You want to take risk in your investments to earn more money, to give away more money, or, probably grow your endowment and give away more money. I think there are good intentions behind it, very harmful results, but that's where risk is encouraged. Risk is not encouraged on the nonprofit, on the grant making side. You're right. It's not encouraged. And I think that comes with everything you said. It comes with real challenges. So there's so much, I think, to get into this year together, Ralph, where we really take a look at these seemingly never-ending fake rules that prevent us from being the best stewards we can be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, I'm looking forward to it, Glenn. We have a lot ahead.
Hey, Break Fake Rules listeners, Glen here. I want to share some news with you. I wrote a book. It's called Control: Why Big Giving Falls Short. You've heard me question philanthropic big giving before, but there's an issue that no one wants to talk about. Philanthropy has a control problem, and it's costing communities dearly. Billionaire donors get major tax breaks to park money in charitable funds. Today, there's over $2 trillion stockpiled in these accounts, growing to $18 trillion by 2050. Can you believe that? That's money that's just sitting there, often invested in for-profit investments instead of being put to work in communities. For years, I believed that centering donors was the best way to maximize the impact of every dollar donated. I even championed that system, and I was wrong. In Control, I take you inside these institutions to show how excessive donor control and the fake rules that protect it keep money from moving when it's needed most. The good news is we created this system, and we can change it. Pre-order your copy of Control: Why Big Giving Falls Short.
Maria Teresa, welcome to Break Fake Rules. We're thrilled you could join us. Really happy you said yes.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I have to say, I love the title Break Fake Rules because you could actually morph anything that you want. So I love that. Nicely done.
So I'm just going to give you the briefest of introductions. You've done so much in your life. You're a national leader. You're the co-founder of Voto Latino. You're a leading voting rights activist and advocate, and you're an amazing political commentator. My first question I'd like to focus on is not so much that aspect of your life, but really go back to your childhood, because you and I have talked. You grew up in Sonoma County, north of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I'm curious how that shaped you and what kind of fake rules that you grew up with that you had to break in your life to become the person that you've become.
I think I had to break all the rules. Like, had I had to color within the lines, I wouldn't have been able to do the work, to be honest, right? And I think, Ralph, I was at a dinner recently and someone turned out that they were from San Francisco. I said, I grew up in Sonoma, and it was the collective, it was an Oz of Sonoma. And they're like, well, how was Sonoma? I said, well, Sonoma politicized me, right? Because it did. Sonoma politicized me. Sonoma is one of the most beautiful places on earth that has so many undercurrents that as an immigrant kid, I had to learn how to navigate. And it was one of those instances. So I came to this country when I was 3 years old. I fiercely felt American the moment I got here. And part of it was because I was acutely aware of coming from Colombia, where my opportunities were limited because my mother was of, Afro-Colombian descent and didn't have a college education. And I understood at a young age what this meant here. So I often say that, I'm able to straddle these worlds because in many ways, what we're seeing at a national stage when it comes to the divisiveness of America, I witnessed my mother having to navigate it at home with my grandparents. And then even more in Sonoma, because it was not a surprise to see a Confederate flag. When I was in 8th grade, the Aryan Nation marched in Napa, the town next door. And I tell folks of these things and they're just, they clutch their pearls like, in Sonoma? I'm like, in liberal Sonoma. This was liberal Sonoma, right? And so really it was learning had I lived within the constraints of what was expected of me at an early age of being a brown girl with limited resources and all this stuff that was being conditioned, I would have been limited. But I guess what was also helpful was the fact that I was going to school and reading in the textbook that in America, I can do whatever I damn well pleased, right? So that indoctrination, really, I deeply believed in it. And so I think that journey of what I was being conditioned to believe that I had to live in certain lanes versus what history and the promise of America kept telling me allowed me to break the rules, so to speak, and not to conform of expectation.
You're getting into a whole bunch there that I think is, definitely what drove Ralph to ask that question, which is where we are as a country, right? And I think there are a set of expectations, norms, perhaps some physical expectations, some demographic, historical expectations of what American is. And then there's a pretty, hopefully, even if not larger majority that believes in an America that doesn't necessarily fit with a particular set of rules. And those two things are clashing in a significant way. How do you look upon the future of your work and the context in which we're operating?
I think that one of the things that we're seeing is that it's the very first time where the government elected by the people is not working within the norms that we're used to in this country. And I think that that's really hard for folks to comprehend. And in the work that we do, one of the biggest headlines last time was that Latinos voted for Trump, and they buried the lead. In fact, you had some people switch over, yes, but a good third of the people who had voted in 2020 had sat it out in 2024. And that's because they didn't buy into what the Republicans were selling, which was mass deportation. And what the Democrats were selling, they got disappointed. And people have a really hard time understanding that, right? When they said, well, this was so existential. It's when you are working with a community where your elected leaders fail to make the basic contract, it's easy to get disillusioned, especially when you look at the Latino community hasn't gotten a break since the first Trump administration. And what I mean by that is that we were overwhelmingly, when COVID hit, we were overwhelmingly the essential workers. We were overwhelmingly, close to 250,000 children were left orphaned. No one ever talks about that, right? And that economic piece of it also was never fully realized. And so there's all these elements that explain what happened, but the moment that we're living in, where we see the folks that sat it out, the folks that said the system doesn't work, it allows us to actually demonstrate what happens when you get back into it. If you, Glen and Ralph, if you were to say like one of our biggest leadership challenges at Voto Latino was that, so there's 178 million Americans that are registered to vote in this country. Voto Latino in our 21 years, I can proudly say that we have registered close to 1%. We have registered 1.8 million. So we've registered 1 million registered voters. 80% of the people that we registered could go out and vote. We have had meaningful impact in key battleground states, whether we're talking about Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, like that's where we've concentrated these voters. And now our work, what we failed to do though, is then once they were registered and they turned out, we never gave them policy issues that they should be fighting for. We just assumed that the politicians, once elected, would do the right thing. So one of the things that, one of our charge now is actually coming up with what is a smart growth agenda for the Latino community that impacts every single American, and what's a smart immigration program that actually safeguards our loved ones that are already here, and make politicians accountable and teach the rest of the process. And so one of the things that came out, Ralph, out of that, the convening that I shared with you, was this charge of how do we get people prepared in mass mobilization, because what makes this moment different from the people that are on one side versus the people that are fighting back. I think it's really important for us to remind ourselves that the people that are on the extreme right aren't that many, and they're losing followers all the time. They just have right now the biggest bullhorn. But it was a multicultural America that came out in 2018. It was a multicultural America that safeguarded us in 2020. And it was a third of us that said, oh, shoot, 24, I'm just a little too tired, so I'm going to sit it out. We need them back. But there's a multicultural America with our allies that really do have a different vision of this country. And we've allowed ourselves to feel tired at a time when we actually need to be on alert and recognize that we are defining the future of this country in the midterms in a very different way.
Maria Teresa, I can't wait to see more about what Voto Latino is going to do in 2026. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the demands that you are thinking of making. I love the education piece of what Voto Latino is doing, but I'm very curious about the demands piece. Can you tell us a little bit more?
So one of the things that, we always at Voto Latino, we disproportionately register the children of immigrants. That's disproportionately who we register. And what we have historically done is basically said, okay, we've registered you and we're going to go ahead and hand you off to someone else to help you with the advocacy part of it. And what we realized in retrospect is that we never gave people the avenue of advocacy so that there could be pressure on doing the right thing. For a long time, the Democrats have fallen into the trap of looking at the border. And if we were to take a step back, once you hit the border, that's a broken immigration policy, and that's actually an international issue. So how can we start divorcing what is happening at the border and as a Western Hemispheric issue? That's actually not what my voters are concerned with, and it's not what the American people are concerned with right now. They're concerned with, is my dad, who's been here for 23 years, 30 years, 40 years, how can I make sure that he has paid his taxes, he's been here, he's done everything right by the law, he may have a small business, may not, and is a good steward of the community. How can we get him to pathways of legalization? And the second part is we also need to have an honest conversation of what are the future immigration flows that we need as a nation to make sure that we are thriving for the next 50 years.
There is so much we could cover here, Maria Teresa, and I want to make sure to ask you the question we ask everybody as they come onto the show, and that is, if there was one major fake rule, which one would you ask us all to break?
So I will actually channel my grandmother. My grandmother was married off at 13 years old to someone that was 12 years her senior and had 8 children by the time she was 26 years old. And her husband said that it was too much responsibility, so walked out on her. And at 26, her youngest was 8 months old, and she raised 8 amazing, amazing citizens that were contributing and are loving and caring. And I remember when I started Voto Latino, I was in a funk because I was starting this idea on a credit card, right? Don't do that. It's a terrible math, guys. But I was telling her, woe is me. Like, after this woman's gone through everything. And she said, María Teresa, you have to remember that if you really want this, no is for everybody else. And what she was trying to say is that you're going to get all the doors slammed in your face, but you just need one yes. And so if I was following the rules of protocol, and especially culturally of being afraid to ask and recognizing vulnerability of what I didn't know, and definitely the resources I didn't have, there would be no Voto Latino. And it was owning this idea that the vision was to enfranchise millions of young people to help shepherd America for their families was worth it. And that it was taking a risk that if I failed, at least I wouldn't go to bed thinking, oh, shoot, I never tried. And so I would just encourage folks to always listen to that inner person, but more importantly, recognize that no is for everybody else. Everybody will say no to you, and that's okay because you only need one yes.
That's got to be one of the best ones we've had yet. And look, it just came right off the top of your head. Just beautiful.
Glenn, you're really good.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing every day, here and everywhere else.